Now, ivory plays a huge role as well. And it's very common to carve ivory. It's very soft, it's free of grain, at least when you're carving it. And it's a material that's sought after because it's pure white. So we're going to see ivory used by both Christians and pagans. And for the remainder of this class, when I refer to pagans, I'm referring to non-Christians, unless I specify otherwise. So what we're seeing here is a suicide of Jesus and suicide of Judas and crucifixion of Christ. And we're seeing a specific narrative here. Now, before we get into it, you'll notice the figures are clumsy. These are clearly late Roman or post-Roman figures. In the year 420, we're actually late Roman Empire. And we see these large heads, these very clumsy, stocky bodies, which really aren't very realistic. And what you're seeing is the crucifixion of Jesus. And this is one of the early images of the crucifixion. Here we have a Roman centurion. According to the Bible, when Jesus dies on the cross, after he dies, the Roman centurion guarding him shoves a spear into his body, and blood as well as water will pour out as a last miracle. So that's what we have here. We have St. John the Evangelist standing closest to him, and then Mary, the Virgin Mary, Jesus' mother, behind him. Hanging from the tree is Judas, and beneath him is his bag of silver coins, 30 pieces of silver that he received for letting the Romans know where to find Jesus. Above Jesus says basically Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. It's shortened here considerably. And that was, again, his crime. The Romans saw him as trying to usurp power by naming himself a king. Now, this is setting up some traditions for the crucifixion. We see him nailed through the hands, which is very common, but it's not the way people are crucified. People were actually nailed through the wrist, right about there, or tied around the wrist and then nailed through the hand. We see the feet together, and that's something that will be an argument for a considerable amount of history, where people are arguing how his feet would be arranged. But this was part of a larger box, and here we see other parts of that box. Speaking of stories of Jesus' life. And these ivory boxes would have contained any number of things. It would have been a small box for personal items. Now, it's not just Christians who are creating these pieces. There's still some pagans out there, because just because the emperor said Christianity is the state religion doesn't mean everyone follows along. We can only imagine what would happen if the president came out and named a state religion. It would be a bad time, and not everyone would join in. Some people would practice secretly, some people would be much more forthright. And here we see a woman sacrificing an altar, and the first thing you may be noticing is, wow, this seems to be of much higher quality than the Christian piece. Do the Christians have lousy artists? And the answer is no. We're just happening to find a fine piece of pagan art. The Christian art also has artists, but of course they're going to have a smaller pool of artists. There are less Christians than there are pagans. And a lot of Romans will convert to Christianity, but in name only. So we see this very fine piece, and again, it's part of a box. Here on the left, we see the remains of another panel from the box. On the right, we see recreations of the two. And this is ivory once again. The ivory has cracked, which ivory tends to do over time. But we see these very fine details. We see a figure that is very Greco-Roman, that has those proper proportions. Maybe the head is a hair big, but not by much. And what she's doing is she's dropping incense onto a burner, onto a hot surface. And that smoke is a gift to the gods. That's her sacrifice to the god. So it's a really remarkable piece, especially being so late in the Roman Empire. Now from here, we're actually going to move away from Rome, and we're going to be dealing with the Byzantine, which is seen as an extension of the Roman Empire. The major difference being that the Byzantines see themselves strictly as Christians, and there's really no acceptance of outside faith.